Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a regular JINSA update on the war in Gaza, coming to you on an irregular time on Tuesday this week due to Shavuot coming up. But we are glad that we were able to make time to have our two esteemed colleagues from Israel join us, former retired Major General Yaakov Aish, the JINSA Julian and Jenny Josephson, Senior Vice President for Israeli Affairs and former Director of Operations at the General Staff of the IDF, and former National Security Advisor and JINSA Distinguished Fellow, retired Major General Yaakov Amidror. Thank you so much both for being with us today. A lot of recent developments to discuss, but perhaps none so optimistic and important as the announcement over the weekend that the IDF was able to rescue 4 hostages alive from Gaza. I wanted to turn first to you, General Aish, to see if you could give us any information about how that operation unfolded. Certainly a complex operation, I'm sure, and a very impressive one. But can you tell us anything beyond what we've read in the newspapers about how this rescue was made possible and was effective?
Well, as a lot of other operations, this one has so many layers. I'll try to peel it and to describe the operational and the intelligence part of it, and to describe it not in so many details because it has its own limitations. And maybe later we can speak about some other implications such as operational and strategic coming from that one. As with other operations, it started with a very meticulous intelligence work, the same intelligence that failed in October 7th. And the same organizations did a remarkable good work in creating highly relevant intelligence that allow to initiate planning and later on an execution. I would say a very impressive execution of hostages rescue operation. But it started by very good intelligence that was analyzed and later on planned into an operational plan that was presented in the different levels within the IDF, to include the Shabak, the ISA, and up to the level of the Prime Minister. And with all the ecosystem surrounding us, the negotiation and some other operations that took place in the last few weeks, they got the permission to move on and to promote it up to the level that in Saturday morning, a green light was given to the forces. We are talking here on a cooperation between different organizations, an interagency, a classical interagency operation. It means the IDF, the intelligence, Southern Command, the 98th Division were under the Southern Command that gave the envelope to the whole operation, the Shabak, the ISA, and the Yamam, the special rescue unit that is working very closely with the IDF and with the Shabak in the last, I would say, decade. And together it led to an operation which is not far from Black Hawk Down, very similar environment in 2 different places. One house, they were guarding Noor Gamani, the female. The other one, the other 3 hostages. And they went to the 2 places at the same time, penetrated, secured the hostages under heavy fighting, and started to evacuate them. And here, I'm not sure we can go to all the details. What have happened is all type of challenges, new challenges, and problems and impediments that the only difference from Black Hawk Down that they have anticipated that this type of incidents might happen, and they had contingencies in place. So when a truck gear of a truck is broken, they had a solution for that, and so on and so forth. And together with the envelope, and together with a very close air support, I'm talking here about 15 meters close air support for those forces. They were able to secure the hostages, to secure the force, and to evacuate them out of Nuseirat. I was using the word Black Hawk Down because for everyone who saw that movie and the complexity of a build-up area, and we know what is the situation in Gaza, what is the situation in Nuseirat, highly, very dense populated area. And to fight your way in and to fight your way out and to secure the hostages, which is your mission, to bring them alive. Very complicated, but again, due to a careful planning and very, very impressive intelligence work, they've succeeded to do it. At the end of the day, 4 lives, 4 hostages that were rescued in Shabbat. And I'm sure that those who are following the news over here in Israel, they saw how important it is, although it's only 4 out of 124 that were kept. And right now we are talking about 120. So this is about that operation. It has a lot of layers. Let me just remind one, which is so important. It's another proof that the Israeli government, the IDF, and all the other organizations are highly committed, not just to win the war, but when it comes to the elements of winning, which is to eliminate Hamas as a military organization, as a terror organization, and to rescue the hostages. And the third one is to settle down the residents of the South. The total commitment is there, and it was proved once again via that operation, as it is proven with so many other operations and activities in the South.
Thanks, General Aish. If I could just ask for a couple more details where you're able to provide them on the intelligence question. There's been reporting here in the U.S. That the United States helped provide some of the intelligence that led to either the finding or the release of the hostages. Are you able to comment on that at all or give us any information?
From obvious reasons, I cannot comment. What I can say that there is a very close cooperation the IDF have with the U.S. and Amidro, who was one of those who founded that cooperation. I'm sure can elaborate on that in many areas, and specifically also in intelligence. I don't know what is the relevancy to this operation, but I'll leave it like that.
Can you tell us a little more about where they were being kept? What were the locations like? We've heard that they were maybe civilian homes, but they also seem to have been heavily guarded.
Okay, that's a very important part. They were guarded by into apartments. One of the apartments belongs to Hamas supporters. One of them is a doctor together with his son, and the other one was another apartment. Obviously, Hamas was paying them to do so. I don't want to go to too much details. One was heavily secured by locals. That's why the force has to fight his way in and to fight his way out. It wasn't enough to surprise, because immediate threats were in place, and all type of threats. It's not only guards. I'm talking about terrorists equipped with the RPG, with the rifles, with the IEDs, with sniping capabilities, with anti-tank capabilities. Everything was there. That's why it was so heavily involved in fighting their way out from both places. The first apartment and the other one that was 200 meters from there. And that's why once they had a broken truck, the whole area had to be secured by paratroopers and some armored tanks and vehicles, together with the Air Force. By that, they've isolated the rescue force and the hostages, and they allowed them a secure corridor out of that area. And that's why you can see so many injuries and killed Palestinians. They were coming to hit the force and to prevent them from going out, and they had no other choice but to eliminate those threats, and to make sure that the route back is secured and open. And if you are calculating the numbers, and this is around 100 terrorists that were killed, coming in different waves from different directions, to include from roofs and from other apartments. They had no other option but to remove those threats in order to allow their way out.
Do we know?
If
yes,
I may,
please go.
I think it's very important what was said now by General Aish. Some people condemning Israel for the number of Palestinians which had been killed. Someone from the United Nations said it even might be a genocide. I mean, words of exaggeration. It's very important to understand Hamas put the hostages in civilian buildings, in civilian apartments with civilian people, some of them supporters of Hamas, and some of them, we don't know if they are supporters of Hamas or not. The investigation will continue probably. And they were surrounded by huge number of civilians. In a way, it is a classical example of human shield when it is coming to terrorists using their own people to shield the hostages in this case, or another terrorist in other cases. So, I mean, if someone wants to understand why the number of Palestinians which had been killed, and many of them, at least according to the international organization, are not affiliated with Hamas, this is the example. The doctor which hosted them at home, and his son, which was a media guy of Al Jazeera, both of them probably in all criteria had been identified as civilians. But look what they did. So it is just giving you a better understanding of how complicated is the situation on the ground, and how the identification of people which had been killed as non or members of Hamas is not relative, is not connected to the reality on the ground. It is so complicated to identify, to differentiate between those who are part of Hamas and those who are not part of Hamas, because they just had been paid by Hamas to keep the hostages. And there are many examples like that of weapon systems in private buildings, in private apartments, that the Hamas members are coming in and out. The apartment is totally civilian, but inside there is the weapon which is used by Hamas. So people who are living in this apartment, are they civilians, or it's a collateral damage if they had been killed, or it is part of the war against terrorists? And it became almost impossible to differentiate between the civilians and the terrorists. And in this case, it's very clear example, because here we have all the evidence.
On that point, I know that the American generals and admirals who were part of our Gaza assessment task force that was in Israel in February to study the war and just released their report last month in May, which I commend to all of you to read if you haven't. You can find it on our website at jinsa.org. One of the things they were most struck by hearing from the IDF is about how Hamas fights without uniforms, but also without weapons. That the guy who's going to go launch rockets might be carrying a basket of vegetables with a battery as he walks to the rocket launcher, and if you hit him, he doesn't have a weapon on him. Or the fighters who might get weapons when they're firing from a building, but then leave them in the building, and when they're in the street, they don't have any weapons. And are they a civilian when they're hit, or are they a terrorist? I think it's one of definitely the things that makes this conflict so complicated. Do we know whether the hostages were in these apartments all 8 months? Had they been moved, or had they been able to stay in one place? General Aish, do
Well,
we
it's
know?
not clear yet. We are still debriefing them, but obviously they were moved once or twice. What is really important to understand is that they were heavily secured, and together with what you have described, the fact that Hamas terrorists have caches of weapons and what they need hidden in the civilian apartments, where they can move from one place to the other, allow them to take those rifles and RPG and to attack the force that was trying to pave his way in and then out. That's why it was so heavily involved with the killed and injured terrorists, because they were coming in waves. At the beginning, at the area of the two apartments, and then along the route out. And then when the truck was stuck on its way out, they surrounded it, and the force had no other choice but to call the Air Force in order to secure them. So many of those who came to hit the truck or the APCs were killed over there. And then again, when they were driving their way out. And it was during daylight. It wasn't a night operation where people are in their houses asleep. So it's another element that added the number of terrorists that were so heavily involved here.
Yeah, you mentioned that it was a daylight operation, and one of the reasons I wanted to ask whether we know if they had been moved or not was to get a sense of how time sensitive the intelligence was, how quickly the operation came together, how urgently Israel had to act, and what were the factors for deciding to stage the operation during daytime as opposed to nighttime.
I think that here the preparations were very important. There was they made some preparations on the ground with forces which didn't know what is the purpose of what they are doing, to make the ability to reach the place easier than it was expected. And they have to bring units from different places in Israel and different agencies in Israel. The special unit which made it at the end is under the command of the police. The Israeli system is very complicated in one way, but the cooperation between the different agencies is totally different than other countries, because they work together all the time in the West Bank and in Gaza as well. Mm-hmm. So the cooperation was very, very good with the interagencies, as I told you, the police in this case, and of course between the different services within the army, the Air Force, the headquarters on the ground. So it is very complicated in one way, but it is very usual in Israel to make these complexities in operations. We have an experience of doing it in the past, and of course the intelligence is coming from totally different agencies at least in this case. And again, it's very complicated, but we have the experience how how to do it, and they had the intelligence in advance because they had to prepare on the ground all the preparations which are needed.
And just to clarify, General Amador, when you say the interagency cooperation is different, you mean because in the West Bank and Gaza, the distinction between sort of domestic police operations and foreign military operations isn't quite as clear cut as it might be for the United States, for example, between what it counts as domestic and foreign.
Here you have the first special unit from the police. You have the intelligence from the Shabak, which is a civilian organization. You have the intelligence from the IDF intelligence. The Air Force is part of it. The ground forces are part of it. The special units of the GHQs are also part of the envelope of the operation. So it is complicated if you look at it from the command and control point of view. It's different agencies and units, but as I said, after many years of experience doing it, we learn how to do it. I remember the first day in which nothing worked when it was a combination of Shabak and the IDF and the Air Force. Now we have the experience and we made many mistakes in the past, which allow us to make less today.
And then let me ask: do we know if this area Nuseirat, where the hostages were found, had it previously been cleared in previous IDF operations in Gaza? No.
This is one of the areas to which we just eroded the fringe of the refugee camp. We didn't go into it yet.
And so, do we think that the terrorists who provided the resistance, who fought back for the hostage operation, they had just stayed in Nuseirat during the entirety of the war and hadn't entered the conflict previously?
I don't know.
Or they had been reconstituted from other parts? We don't know.
No way to answer your questions because of the way that we are doing it, moving civilians from one side of the strip to another. We don't know how many of the terrorists move with the civilians and how many of them are now concentrating in Nuseirat and how many of them, percentage-wise, I mean, came from outside and are not belonging to the place. It will take time to investigate, and I think this now is not so important to invest the energy and time in this question. At the end, in this case, what we are doing is we are taking part of what we think is the area that we want to clean, and we are meeting the problems there and define the enemies by the reaction and the action of the enemy. As I told you, many of them are civilians. If you meet them in the street, they are civilians. Only way you use the Kalashnikov and fight you know that you have to kill them. So it's very complicated. As you said, they can go to launch the rocket with the food in their basket and a battery of their own telephone, and everything is civilian. The telephone is civilian, the basket is civilian, everything is civilian.
So moving from the operational to the strategic, General Amador, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the implications of this rescue operation. Obviously, it provides a big morale boost.
I don't think there is any real implication strategically to this operation. It says to the Hamas guys, you have to take into consideration that the IDF will reach you inside, and probably many of the hostages will be moved now to other places, probably under the ground. But I don't know. That the intelligence will have to work very hard to see what are the movements which had been done. Strategically, it does matter. Strategic, what important, we are moving on in Rafah. We are, after isolating the strip from Egypt by controlling the Philadelphia corridor. We found underground tunnels under the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. We are investigating how many of them are new tunnels and how many of them are old tunnels which had been used for years by Hamas. We are very careful not to blame anyone because we want to have good relations with the Egyptians, but the facts are there. And I think that is very significant because now it's clear there is no new flow of weapon systems and help to Hamas from outside. Now what we have to do is to push into the center of Rafah. Because of the United States of America, we are doing it very slowly because it was agreed that it will not be like, rapid assault, which bring many casualties on the other side. So it is very, very, very slow. But we are continuing to do it slowly. Then it will take probably another few weeks or even 2 months to finish to dismantle all the infrastructure of Hamas that can be identified and to kill and to destroy those who are inside some tunnels and some tunnels which are targeted by us. And afterwards, it will be moved to another stage of the war in which we will continue the mopping up process as we did in the north, but the intensive with full forces and a lot of air force will not continue because after dismantling the infrastructure, it is less needed. And at the same time, it might be much more needed in the north. So how to combine between the needs of Gaza and the needs in the north, in Lebanon, I mean, and how to play between the two places and how we continue and finishing the job of dismantling Hamas military capabilities, in spite of the fact that many of Hamas members will remain on the ground, will be there with their Kalashnikov as RPG. But as an organization, the organization will not exist and they will lose the ability to produce, for example, new weapon systems. And by isolating it from Egypt to bring new weapon systems from Egypt, all that should contribute to the situation in which we will move to another stage in which the intensity will be reduced and the number of soldiers which are needed as boots on the ground will be decreased. And this is a process that will take time.
On the topic of the tunnels that you raised between Gaza and Egypt, General Aish, if I could just ask you if there's any additional details you can share. I think it was reported last week that the IDF found one that was 2 kilometers long, which I think, at least to me, was surprising because my understanding was that many of the cross-border tunnels into Egypt were shorter and more rudimentary, but this one seemed more sophisticated. Is that surprising?
No, it's not surprising. Let me take you a bit backwards. In a certain stage, when Assisi took the power from Morsi, he decided to work on clearing up most of the tunnels. I'm talking about back in 2015 and 2014 in that area. And for that sake, they have cleared the area between Philadelphia axis into Sinai up to a kilometer. The reason behind it was to make sure that there are no hatches for tunnels in that area. In order to deal with it, what Hamas did is to take the tunnels and dig them further into Egyptian Rafah. Otherwise, the hatches will not be hidden and they will be exposed to us and later on to the Egyptian military. Now, this is the reason why they are going deeper into Sinai, into Egyptian Rafah. And on the other side, inside the Palestinian Rafah, the reason why they are digging them longer is to make sure that they have a hatch in a house which is a safe place where they can hide the hatch, and all the activities of going in and out of those tunnels. There are different tunnels for different purposes, different length and different width. Some of them are, with rails, some of them with winch, some of them with cables, some of them with the communication, all type of capabilities. So right now they have exposed more than 20, and it's not the end. Now that the IDF is controlling the Philadelphia access up to the shoreline, I'm sure they will find more. There is a lot of work involved with that. It's intelligence, technology, digging, excavating, and so on and so forth. And at the end, the mission is not just to expose, it's also to demolish. Bear in mind that while they are doing it along the Philadelphia axis, in order to secure all those activities, they have to fight inside Rafah and the refugee camps surrounding Rafah city. So it's not sterilized the secure area. And that's why it takes time. This is the situation over there. It's far more than just the Rafah brigade that was deployed together with the remnants of the other battalions in the Rafah area. It's also the whole military infrastructure that feed Hamas with their needs via those tunnels. And that's why it has its own, I would say, strategic and operational importance. And that's why it needs time, to really clearing it up.
So what is the expected timeline for the Rafah operation before we get to this next phase of reduced intensity that General Amador was describing?
I would say that it's a matter of weeks up to a few months. It depends to what level we want the area to be cleared, and how deep we are going to clear the refugee camps. As you can see, even if you are gaining control on a certain area in the Gaza Strip, to finish clearing it up above ground, under the ground, infrastructure, and until the last Hamas elements in the area, it takes time. It depends to what level. And the level of removing the threat of the formation, the Hamas formation in that area, it's a matter of weeks, I would say. The infrastructure would take time. You need time, as I mentioned, to reveal, to expose, and later on to demolish. And in between, you need to map it. And there is all type of sensitivities that we maybe speak about them later on with the vicinity of the Egyptian forces, and many other elements.
Yeah, be happy to hear more about that now, General Aish. How is Israel handling those relations, those tensions with Egypt?
So I think we mentioned it in the last brief shortly, but in order to operate along the Philadelphia axis, it's not only operational and intelligence capabilities. It has a significant, I would say, part of liaison heavily involved here. And we have liaison officers from the international division, IDF international division within the brigades, with the forces, fully coordinated with the HQ, and coordinated also to the right level with the Egyptian forces, which are very close. And this is highly important. Otherwise, all type of miscalculation, misunderstanding, incidents might happen, and this is kind of a mechanism of a deconfliction in place, embedded totally within the IDF units in order to avoid it. So this is only one part of the effort. The other one is done at a higher level, at the higher echelon on different HQs with their colleagues at the other side. And I don't want to elaborate too much. There are also third players that are taking part over here. And bear in mind that everything is done while you are fighting in Rafah and the refugee camps, and you have a massive, massive humanitarian effort. Because when I'm talking about not just mobilizing the Palestinians into safe havens or security humanitarian areas, you have to provide them with all the other needs. I think I've mentioned already the water pipes that were deployed, routes that were paved especially for that, and obviously supply of goods and medical support that is flowing in to that area while we are doing it from other areas at the same time. I'll just mention two terminals that were opened at the northern part of the Gaza Strip for that purpose. There is the American JLOC, which is kind of a maritime bridge, also started to provide goods into the Gaza Strip, and some other terminals that the IDF have opened in order to make sure that the humanitarian effort and the flowing of goods for the civilian population is works smoothly.
Thank you. General Amador, if I could turn to you and ask you about another recent development, which was President Biden's speech announcing a peace proposal, a peace plan that was ambiguous. I think not a lot of details about it, but he also suggested had the support of the Israeli war cabinet. So if you could, is there anything more you can tell us about what is included in the peace plan, what Israel's position on it is, what the process of negotiating it with the United States has looked like, and what the status of those negotiations is?
I think when Kissinger spoke about creative ambiguity, he wanted to emphasize more the creative and less the ambiguity. In this case, it's more ambiguity and less creative. It is less creative because what Americans have is a vision about changing the Middle East, connecting Saudi Arabia to Israel, its Palestinian state, reforming the Palestinian Authority, and changing Hamas. I don't know in what way. In the American offer, there is no even one word about the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, and it's clear from the Israeli side that I hope that we will stand behind our words. We will not we are not ready to stop the war in this stage and to say, okay, rebuild Gaza, we finished. I don't know what will come out of it. I hope that at the end it will not just confrontation between Israel and the United States of America. We are ready to pay high price for having the hostages, including as in this operation to sacrifice life of soldiers and commanders. In this case, the leader of the assault team was killed when they opened fire when he entered to the house to release the hostages. But even more, if we needed to pause to have a pause in the war, and we know that during the pause the other side will make all the efforts to be more ready for the next stage. But we are ready to pay high prices, but not to stop the war or to evacuate our forces from Gaza Strip. I don't know what Americans have in mind. They went to the Security Council, which has adopted a decision with support of everyone but Russia. We don't know it. Hamas said that he is accepting the decision of the Security Council and ready to negotiate about the details. It's not a formal answer, it's just in the media. I don't know. The ambiguity here is huge, but we are continuing to act in Rafah. And we understand that we might face a situation. By the way, it cost us probably 3 to 4 months, all these negotiations with the other side. And we know that there is a price for that because they are much more prepared now than they had been before. And the world is much more against Israel because the time with the pictures on Gaza, people ignoring the war was imposed on Israel in 7th of October. So our life is much complicated. But the American offer is very, as you said, with a lot of ambiguity, and I don't know what will be the result. Now we are continuing slowly, but to push inside Rafah and between Rafah and the Egyptian border.
When you say that negotiations have imposed costs and delays on Israel, you mean to say that the Rafah operation specifically was delayed while negotiations were ongoing?
Yeah, at the beginning it was Khan Yunis and then Rafah. Yes, including the Philadelphia corridor, which was very important.
Do you see international pressure as effective in trying to push Hamas to accept a deal? In recent days, Qatar has claimed that they're going to throw out Hania if he doesn't accept the deal. Is that effective?
That was denied, and I must say the Sinwar is not under pressure from anyone but the situation on the ground.
There was claims made in the U.S. that the Israeli hostage rescue operation made a deal less likely. Do you see that as being true in any way?
It's when you hear this, then you might think that before the operation there were chances to have an agreement, and now we don't have an agreement. Hamas didn't say yes. By that he said no. So what agreement was there? Anyhow, no, I don't think. I think everyone that can be rescued by us should be done because we don't know what will happen tomorrow, and we cannot trust Sinwar and those people which try to convince us to trust Sinwar. I think are doing huge mistake.
General Aish, I wanted to turn to you and ask you about the North, but before I do, I wanted to invite our audience to submit any questions that they have using the Q&A feature in Zoom. If you type in your question, I'll pose it to our two panelists. But General Aish, it seems like things are heating up in the North quite literally with the recent wildfire that was sparked by Hezbollah attacks. Is there in fact an escalation going on, or what is the situation in the North like right now?
Well, I think what we have seen in the last week is kind of an escalation in two dimensions. Let's start at the tactical operational level. We can see a heavy use of drones by Hezbollah, together with barrage of rockets aimed not only to the first and the second line along the northern border, but also to the depth of Israel, i.e. to the area of Acre, Nahariya, Haifa, Israel Valley, Tiberia, and the Golan Heights. And it seems that together with the anti-tank capabilities that they are systematically used to demolish houses, simple as that. That's what they are doing in Metula and the other villages along the border. They're simply trying to spread the damage and to hit the houses, because they know what type of impact it has, not only about the residents that were uprooted from their houses, but also on the Israeli public. And in terms of escalation, they are stretching the probability for a full escalation by taking it further into Israel. And the fact that you are taking all those elements together, is a significant proof that Hezbollah, after they have suffered so many losses, don't have the oxygen nor the appetite, or should I say the will, to continue fighting. And they're trying a different strategy in order to prevent us from inflicting severe hits and damage on its capabilities. Things that we did not only by hitting more than 300 and almost 50 of his operatives inside Lebanon, but also severely inflicted damage on his infrastructure in the first and second line, I would say, in the first 10 kilometers in the southern part of Lebanon. When they started to suffer also in the depth on highly precious assets of Hezbollah, they decided to use a different strategy. But I think it's a very clear sign that they are under heavy criticism and are trying to use different tactics.
So you're suggesting that the escalation is a way to try to push back against Israeli action to try to get Israeli strikes inside Lebanon to stop? Is that the tactic?
I think this is their way. This is their way to prove that they are willing, allegedly, to move one stage ahead. But I think it's a clear proof that they are under a lot of pressure. And we are talking here about accumulating pressure from day one. I mentioned the number of Hezbollah operatives that were killed. And bear in mind that we are talking here about leaders, tactical leaders, operational leaders, intelligence leaders, and they are losing them almost on a daily basis in a very accurate, pinpoint way to include yesterday and the day before yesterday. It doesn't matter if they're moving by a car, foot, or a bike. Suddenly they are killed. And I think it's a very significant proof that they are under a lot of pressure. When you are adding on it the fact that more than 100,000 Lebanese have left the southern part of Lebanon for more than 8 months, not only on the Israeli side. We are talking here about the Lebanese side. It seems like the pressure is growing.
So how do you see that pressure playing out? Because on the one hand, you have Israel responding to Hezbollah escalation with further strikes. So you could get to a point where you have continued escalation to a conflict. Or is it more likely that at some point that pressure will force Hezbollah to finally stop its attacks and retreat?
That's a tough question. I can say definitely that we will do whatever is needed in order to remove the threat and to allow the Israeli residents back to their homes and villages. And that's exactly what we will do. And we are using a certain strategy right now, and this strategy might be shifted. It's only a matter of decision by the Israeli government, a decision that was not made yet. But the strategic goal is very clear, and we have to analyze the situation according to what is happening on the ground, not about assumptions. And we should not have any assumption here. We should be very clear and very focused, as we are in the South, to make sure that we are paving their way back into their homes, into a secure environment today and in the future. And this is the mission.
To this point, and to something that General Amador raised earlier, let me read one of the questions from our audience. Is the Israeli government going to wait until Gaza is officially over to begin operations it wants to do to push Hezbollah north of the Litani River? Or will it attempt to take significant action against Hezbollah while the IDF is still doing serious operations in Rafah?
The Israel is, we have to remember the IDF amount of units is limited. We have to take care not just for the north and the south, but also to oppress the attempt of Hamas to ignite the West Bank, to which the Iranians try to smuggle weapon systems and huge money from Lebanon and from Jordan. We have to have capabilities to defend ourselves in the Golan Heights from the Shiites, which might use the Golan Heights to attack Israel from another wing. So I don't see Israel going into a big war in Lebanon during the extensive operation in Gaza. But the but is very important. The beginning of the war in Lebanon will probably be by striking huge number of targets that we have in Lebanon. And for that, we need few days. Can we prepare our forces in a way that during these days, we will evacuate forces from Gaza and move them to the north? The answer is yes. It's not the best way to begin a war, but if that will be needed, we know how to do it. So I don't think that is impossible. You cannot exclude it, but the chances that that will be done are not high. For having any good beginning or first steps, which will be well prepared, we need to have less forces in the Gaza Strip. How much is enough? You know, it's a question that no one has an answer. It's not exactly mathematics, but the better situation for Israel, if Israel decide to fight the other war in Lebanon, is to be less committed in Gaza. How much less? Good question. I don't think that anyone has a good answer for.
Related question from Len Hodorkovsky. What is Israel's strategy toward Iran, considering its recent direct strike and increasing deployment of Hezbollah and the Houthis?
The 7th of October brought us to a situation in which we are now concentrating on eliminating the proxies of Iran. First of all, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. And if it will be a war in Lebanon, that would be a very important part of eliminating the proxies of Iran. This is the strongest proxy of Iran. It's the Hezbollah. The question of Iran is a different one. For that, we need the ability to use our Air Force in huge numbers. By the way, I don't know who will be the pilots. All the airplanes will be American made. And here is the difference between the second front in Lebanon, in which we need the ground forces after a very intensive part of targeting and striking by the Air Force. In Iran, it's mainly 90% Air Force, if not more. And for that, Israel is better prepared than to fight both wars with the ground forces.
General Aish, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'll say one word about the north. You were asking in a way to what level we are controlling what is going on. I think we should be ready also for an option that we are not really controlling the escalation or the future escalation. And that's why readiness is a key player here, as it was mentioned, and things might erupt and commence not as we anticipate. And we should bear it in mind, especially after October 7th. And that's why I think it's so volatile over there.
All right. Well, with that, let me thank both of you, General Amador, General Aish, for joining us this evening, your time. Let me thank the audience for tuning in. As always, you can find our latest analyses and papers and research at jinsa.org. I encourage you to check it out. Thank you again. Hag Sameach.
Thank you very much.
Hag Sameach. Thank you very much.
See you next week.
Shabbat Sameach, Amidro.
Hag Sameach.